Hello friends, welcome to SJ's classes. We are discussing Module 3 of your paper Literary Criticism. In the previous video lesson, we analyzed the first critic of this period, which is Neoclassical period, and he was John Dryden. We also analyzed some of the important contributions that Dryden has made towards the realm of English literary criticism. In this video lesson, we will be discussing Dr. Samuel Johnson. I'm sure you have come across this name earlier. You might have known him or learned him as the first lexicographer of English language. His dictionary that came out in 1755 is probably the first dictionary in English language. But he is not just a lexicographer, he is an essayist, he is a literary critic, he is an author, and much more. In this video lesson, we will be looking at him specifically as a literary critic. We will also try to understand what are the major contributions that he made towards this area. But before venturing into this particular topic, let us have an idea regarding his biography. Dr. Samuel Johnson was born on September 18, 1709 in Lichfield, Staffordshire, England, and he died on December 13, 1784 in London. He was an English critic, biographer, essayist, poet, and a lexicographer. He was widely regarded as one of the greatest figures of 18th century. But this great man did not even complete his degree. Before completing his degree, he launched himself out into the coffee houses and print shops of literary London, living a life of genteel poverty, forever under the threat from his creditors. His earliest works include the long-form poems London and the Vanity of Human Wishes, and the periodicals that he contributed toward the Rambler and the Idler. Having completed the mammoth task of assembling the dictionary, a commission for which he was handsomely reimbursed, Johnson wrote an analysis of Shakespeare and also a biography of his friend Richard Savage, who was a poet convicted for murder. A rare foray into fiction happened later on, and that came out in 1759 with the title The History of Phrasales, Prince of Abyssinia. This was a philosophical treatise, a philosophical fable that told the story of a wayward young royal's decision to leave behind his isolated homeland called the Happy Valley in search of a true contentment in the wider world. The primary reason for Johnson's enduring appeal, though, outside of his own remarkable achievements in print, is surely the ongoing popularity of James Boswell's fantastically narrated work Life of Samuel Johnson, which came out in 1791. Samuel Johnson is the most widely known figure among the Augustinians. This is primarily due to James Boswell's biography of that friend, philosopher, and guide. Now please note down this particular phrase used by James Boswell in his work Life of Samuel Johnson, the friend, philosopher, and guide. Now, criticism for Johnson was a subordinate activity to creative, imaginative literature, and he has stated in one of his articles to Rambler. He says, "Criticism, in my opinion, is only to be ranked among the subordinate and instrumental arts." So for him, creative, imaginative literature always comes first. He had a good working knowledge of the classical and European languages. He was considerably well read. His biography as well as history. He was a voracious reader. He was interested in politics, trade, commerce, and the Constitution of England. Now perhaps this is the first time that you are coming across a critic who has a wide variety of interests. He was interested in reading history, he was interested with biographies of writers, he was also interested with politics, trade, commerce, as well as the Constitution of England. He believed in a direct relationship between life and literature, and hence he believed too that literature is what caters to a good life. and what is born of experience. So literature caters to good life, and good literature is what is born out of experience. Those two are remarkable sentences being made there by Dr. Samuel Johnson. According to Dr. Samuel Johnson, literature should help readers enjoy and endure life fully and its entirety. Look at the scope that Dr. Samuel Johnson gives to literature. He says that literature must help readers to enjoy and endure life, to enjoy everything that comes, everything that you confront in your life, the good part of your life, and also it must help you endure the bad part of your life. Dr. Johnson was also a highly religious man, and he had a strong moral consciousness. For him, truth is man's guardian angel, and he praises works which bring out the truth of human existence in a new and original way. A poet for him was a man among men. He did not possess any special powers denied to the rest of the humanity. He was all admiration for those writings which had a universal appeal. So these are some of the important points to be noted regarding Samuel Johnson, the writer, as well as Samuel Johnson, the critic. Now let us look at some of his important contributions towards the realm of English literary criticism. It was with the arrival of Dr. Johnson on the critical scene that English criticism might be said to have attained some status. There are those who strongly believe that modern criticism starts with Johnson. For example, René Wellek's monumental work History of Modern Criticism, which was published in 8 volumes, begins with Dr. Johnson. His greatest work in criticism is, of course, Lives of Poets, and this work alone bears ample testimony to the greatness of this giant among critics. According to George Watson, Johnson's critical phase can be divided into 4 stages. The first stage happened when he contributed a lot of periodical essays to the Rambler. His second phase is the phase during which he wrote the dictionary. During his third phase, he wrote a preface to Shakespeare, and the fourth phase, he wrote the lives of poets. The Rambler articles contained his critical theory. The dictionary and the preface to Shakespeare revealed the scholar in him, and finally the Lives shows us his strength as a judge of poets and writers of reputation. He wishes to modify the laws laid down by the ancients and not blindly adhere to them. Poetry is forever in change. It is forever in a process of evolution and change, and it is wrong to maintain that the old forms of poetry must survive as they were for all time to come. Dr. Johnson's dictionary is the first dictionary in the world. Single-handedly, he worked on his major project, the Dictionary of the English Language, that took him 8 long years to complete. It contains no fewer than 40,000 words, each with illustrative examples. Now, this is something which we miss in our modern dictionaries, illustrations. But Dr. Johnson's dictionary had illustrations, and there were around 40,000 words, and that is perhaps why it took him 8 long years to complete it. It is said that it took 40 years for 40 members of the French Academy to accomplish such a stupendous task. Now just imagine the voluminous, the intensity of work that was invested into the making of the first dictionary by Dr. Samuel Johnson. This dictionary provides a system of spelling that could be accepted as a standard. Johnson's edition of Shakespeare, which came out in 1765, was the 6th edition of the great poet in terms of history of editions. So there were a few writers who wrote such prefaces about the great dramatist of Elizabethan era before, and the earlier writers were Nicholas Rowe, Alexander Pope, Lewis Theobald, and William Warburton. The preface is Johnson's first work in extended descriptive criticism. There are 7 units in this long essay, and he discusses Shakespeare as a poet of nature. A defense of his tragic comedy comes in the second part. He talks about his style, his defects, and also attacks on the unities in general. He also talks about the historical background to Shakespearean drama. And finally, his editorial practice. So these are the few things that he discusses in this particular work. The introductory remarks substantiate his theory. There are some inconsistencies in his views on tragic comedy, in his praise of Shakespeare and the later attack on him, and also on his style. But these were the characteristic defects not taken seriously of his age. The best of Johnson's, his magnum opus, his most important contribution to literary criticism is his Lives. It was written in the last stage of his life. Boswell calls it the richest, most beautiful, and indeed most perfect of Johnson's pen. Johnson was commissioned by a committee of London booksellers to undertake to review the life and works of major English poets from Chaucer to his day. These were originally meant to supply biographical prefaces to an edition of English poets, which were published in 10 volumes and then reissued separately. Johnson acceded to their request, but on his own condition. He dropped medieval and Renaissance poets and chose 52 lives from Cowley to Gray. It took 4 years for the lives to be completed. Notable among the poets whose lives were not written are George Herbert and Robert Herrick. The not so popular poets whose names were included are Richard Duke and William Walsh, but Johnson does not dwell much on their lives. The lives of poets are arranged in the order of the dates of their death. So it's not according to their birth years that Dr. Johnson arranged the poets. It's based on their deaths. This essay follows a set pattern of a threefold division. The biography comes first, character of this poet comes the second, and finally he dwells on their criticism. The biographical part is the longest one in many cases, containing the poet's birth, education, growth, etc. The second session, assessing the character of the poet, is usually the shortest of the three, and the third, a critical appreciation and evaluation of the poet, is of a middle length. With the lives, we may be said to have come to the very end of the Augustan or neoclassical criticism. These are not the only contributions made by Dr. Samuel Johnson. Johnson has also given us his views regarding the function of writing through the chapter 10 in his novel Rasselas, which came out in 1759, titled Dissertation upon Poetry. He condemns the blind adherence to rules, and this can be seen in his rejection of the unities and the defense of tragic comedy. He was also of the opinion that only unity of action has to be adhered to. He also stands committed to the neoclassical faith of maintaining decorum in the use of language and poetic diction. It is this faith that made him state that Shakespeare's quibbles was the fatal Cleopatra for which he lost the world and was content to lose it. It is important to reiterate two statements regarding Johnson's assumption which inform his penetrating insights into works which differ widely in the nature of their composition. The first is that his judgment, delivered with all the force at his command, is firmly grounded on the foundation of morality and moral commitment. The second is that a poet should concern himself representing general nature and not any particular experience. Strangely enough, British Romanticism emerged as a revolt against these two basic Johnsonian propositions. So these are the important concepts as far as Dr. Johnson is concerned. I discussed his biography. I spoke about some of his important literary outputs. We saw some of his literary his contributions towards literary criticism, like Lives of Poets and his famous work Preface to Shakespeare. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video lesson, we will start discussing Module 4 of the paper Literary Criticism. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.